I want to get your thoughts on how much business is being listened to throughout this whole process. I suppose your members of the ICC, they want to influence policy, they want to shape policy, they want to give their thoughts on the way policy is playing out on the ground. Is anybody listening?
I don't think they are really. I mean, it's just enormous frustration, dissatisfaction at just the lack of consultation with business. I mean, we're facing an election of just horrible choices. You know, it's either nationalisation or Brexit or both, or just more wrangling. Either way, it's just a lot more disruption, uncertainty for a long time.
And so the business community waiting like everybody else to see what the results will be. If we do see a victory for Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party, and we do see Brexit taking place at the end of January, as he's said he will do, what will your message be then? Because then we're down to the hard graft of getting trade deals done.
Yeah, I mean, the main message is that's when Brexit starts. That's just 3.5 years to get to the start line. And then we've got a really hard deadline within 1 year, which looks very unlikely, being able to achieve a full-on trade negotiation with the EU within 12 months. That sounds very difficult and unrealistic to me.
That sounds challenging then. In terms of what we know already about trading relationships and how they'll change, Northern Ireland features heavily, doesn't it? And there's been a lot of confusion, not least when the Prime Minister himself is asked. He seems to give one message about what will change, and it's contradicted by some of the paperwork that went along with his deal. So what are you expecting, and how ready is business for changes around Northern Ireland and the trading relationships, both GB-NI and GB into the Republic?
Well, I think that says everything you want to know, that it's just complicated and that's not well understood. And for business, that just means more complexity. It's actually a disincentive to trade. It means more cost and more bureaucracy and red tape. And that just makes the trading relationship really difficult. When actually the whole Northern Ireland story has actually it's a perfect example of what happens when you open borders. And what that means to create a peaceful environment. And now we're putting in more complexity again. And all that's going to do is put up barriers to trade and make it more difficult for everybody.
That's part of the Conservative Party manifesto, I suppose, is delivering on the Brexit. Well, we know that's what they want to do, deliver on their Brexit plan. What about the Labour manifesto? Of course, there wouldn't be entirely certainty there, and there'd be probably policies that some of your members would object to. What's the messaging you've been getting back on Labour Party policy?
I think what everyone's concerned around is nationalisation. That sounds like a lot of legal battles, and again, a lot of disruption, and then there's a big, huge question around Brexit, and that is extremely unclear. So it could be nationalisation plus Brexit, or it could be nationalisation and then another 6 months of trying to negotiate with the EU, which sounds unrealistic. It's just an unknown. We
head also into negotiations with the United States around a trade deal. What are the opportunities there? We hear a lot about the areas that many people don't want to be touched, for example, the NHS and food, and certainly they grab the headlines in the UK. What do UK businesses, though, say are the opportunities that can be struck? Because there's quite a lot of open trade happens between these two countries already.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good reason why there isn't a trade deal as well, is because it's actually we're quite different in the way that we see food standards or public services or procurement or other issues. The real opportunities are actually scaling up existing trade. The US is a federated structure, so there's lots of state-based regulations that get in the way of companies trading into the UK, but there is a lot of value and volume of trade with the US. The best way of dealing with it is probably just to try and remove the barriers and then scale up the existing trade.
Which would be the sectors that would benefit there? Is that sort of selling insurance into those?
Services in the main, yeah, absolutely. But trying to get a deal, I think what everybody has to be clear about here is it's not businesses that will ultimately decide. It's going to be consumers, users of public services. That's where the opposition is, and it wasn't that long ago when the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership collapsed in 2 or 3 weeks. After 5 years of negotiations, it was actually a pretty decent deal in the main, but it completely collapsed because there was no public support for it.
And that's where the power is these days.
That's where the
trade
power
negotiations.
Is. Exactly, and that's why now you need a different type of governance structure around trade to manage that public view.
Chris,